Brinton will be taking part remotely. After Clause 54, Amendment 131, Baroness Hayman.
I rise to move Amendment 131 in my name and those of the noble Baronesses Cumberledge and Brinton and the noble Lord Pannick. I'm grateful to all of them for their support. My Lords, this amendment seeks to provide protection for mothers from being photographed or videoed without their consent while breastfeeding their babies. I suspect, my Lords, that few members of the House will have been aware that such unpleasant, intrusive and distressing behaviour takes place at all, and be surprised that it's not actually an offence. Even fewer, I suspect, would seek to defend what the then Minister, Victoria Atkins, described in committee in another place as this unacceptable, creepy and disgusting behaviour. Ms Atkins paid tribute in that debate to the many women who've shared their experiences and distress and their demands for a change in the law in recent months, as do I. I particularly congratulate Julia Cooper, who began the campaign for a change in the law after her own experience and initiated a petition that's now been signed by over 30,000 people and supported by organisations such as the National Childbirth Trust, La Leche League and Mumsnet. Her experience was this. During a visit to a park in Greater Manchester, she noticed a man, first staring at her as she fed her baby, then attaching a long-range zoom lens to his camera and taking photographs. She confronted him and asked him to delete the photos. He refused, saying it was his right. She then approached a park warden. He also unsuccessfully asked the man to delete his photos and then said there was nothing more he could do because the law offered no protection. The response of Greater Manchester Police was exactly the same, sympathetic but powerless. Other women have come forward with similar stories and described how deeply distressing and violating an experience it has been, and their shock at having no recourse when their privacy has been invaded in this way. My Lords, this amendment seeks, therefore, to provide protection and a remedy for individuals affected by this unpleasant behaviour, and to deter and, if necessary, to punish those who perpetrate it. But the context is not simply a matter of protecting the individual. Successive governments have supported and protected women who breastfeed their babies and continue to promote this public good. The Department of Health encourages women who can and choose to do so to breastfeed their babies because it brings powerful public as well as individual health benefits. And only last week, the Chancellor allocated £50 million to support breastfeeding in his package of help for young babies and young families. The Equalities Act protects breastfeeding mothers from discrimination in employment and the provision of services. So it's illegal for a cafe owner to refuse to serve a breastfeeding mother, but not for a man to hover over her with a camera, videoing her as she feeds her baby in a playground. My Lords, far fewer babies are breastfed in this country compared to many others in Europe and beyond. And it's very obvious from repeated surveys on the issue that embarrassment and the logistical difficulty of combining feeding a baby with, quote, normal life is one of the main deterrents that keeps breastfeeding rates in this country so low, with all the detrimental effects on both individual and public health. My Lords, failing to sanction unwanted, intrusive photography can only add to women's reluctance and to their fears. Noble Lords will recall that in 2019, Parliament took action against another unpleasant, intrusive aggression against women, upskirting, by passing the Voyeurism Act. But the provisions of that Act are very narrowly defined and do not protect women in the circumstances that we are discussing today. This amendment mirrors the provisions of the 2019 Act, by adding photographing or videoing women breastfeeding without their consent into the list of prohibited acts under the 2003 Sexual Offences Act, to which the provisions of the Voyeurism Act then apply. My Lords, when this issue was discussed in committee in another place, the Minister did not query the need for action and obviously shared the disquiet amongst members at the present situation. She suggested that the matter could be considered in the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, but that strategy has now been published without any reference to the issue. But her main argument was that we should wait for the Law Commission, which is reviewing the law around the taking, making and sharing of intimate images without consent. But, my Lords, that's a very broad subject, and we know how slowly grind the wheels of such reports' journeys to legislation. And that even when the Law Commission recommends action, there is no guarantee it will be agreed. Less than 50% of Law Commission reviews commissioned in the last decade have as yet led to legislative change. Rather than waiting on a review, which may or may not be accepted by the government after more consultation, and then for a relevant legislative vehicle, we have the chance in this bill to act on this specific, clearly defined issue and to protect mothers and babies now. My Lords, it's, I am ashamed to say, nearly 50 years since I first entered Parliament, and one thing I have learnt in that time is that legislative time can be as precious a commodity as financial resources. This bill gives us the opportunity to protect women from the damage and distress that is currently occurring. I hope the House and the Minister will agree that we should grasp that opportunity. I beg to move.
Yeah.